Anne, thank you for joining us. It is the end of an era. After 11 years, you're stepping away from the club in an official capacity. Can you sum up your emotions following more than a decade at Hearts?
Right. It's quite difficult to do so, actually, Phil, but I suppose they're very mixed. Football has actually just been the centre of my life for the last 10, 11 years. And it's connected with my family, my social life, everything. So I'm a bit worried that I'm going to be lost because I always said I didn't ever want to retire. But having said that, I think the time is right. I'm beginning to feel that I've done everything I can do for the club, and it's now time to move into a different kind of business and have different people leading it. So yeah, mixed emotions. I'm sad. I'll miss an awful lot of people, but equally I think it's the right thing to do.
It's certainly been a journey, so let's go back to the beginning, as you alluded to, family connections there. You were a supporter, attending games with your daughter when things started to look quite really bleak for the club around 2013. I think it was made public that there was £7,000 in the bank back then, and there was months of wages in arrears and season ticket money all gone. It was quite a horrendous experience for you to go back. What are your memories of those circumstances and how the foundation kind of approached you?
I guess the first thing I would say is at that point in time, although I was a season ticket holder for many years, it was not the centre of my world. And I would go to games, enjoy them, not enjoy them or whatever, and forget about it. My daughter, as I've said before, is the opposite. She lives for football. So while I wasn't paying an awful lot of attention to these things, she was. So she would bend my ear every time I saw her. The other thing I have to say is that I had already been working with FOH at this time. So I'd probably been working with them for about a year, initially in an advisory capacity. And at one point, prior to going into administration, there had been an approach made, not by me, but by others, to Mr. Romanoff to say, you know, what can we do? What would you need for us to buy the club? And it was just laughable. £50 million or something, you know. And I remember saying to them, look, the only way we'll be able to do anything is if the club goes into administration, and then we can deal with it in a professional manner. At the minute, it's just not possible to do so. So, yes, I was heavily involved already by the time we did go into administration. And had done quite a lot of forward thinking and planning, if you like.
From that kind of position of peril, how quickly did you then have to move to I suppose, drag the club off its knees and prepare for what would be a season in the Championship?
As I said a few minutes ago, we had actually done quite a bit of work leading up to the deal actually being done in 2014. So as soon as we went into administration, I was talking to the administrators. A number of us were involved in trying to think ahead and plan and collate information. So way before I actually signed on the dotted line, we did have a plan. I had involved a number of other individuals by this time, one of them being Robert Wilson, who helped with the whole strategy and thinking about what we could do. And his knowledge of the SPFL was sort of second to none, so that was very helpful. I'd also involved Kevin Windrum because of his financial background. So we'd done a lot of thinking. We actually had a budget, and we had also, before I actually bought the club, we knew we would need some finance because the club didn't have any, and I would put in what I was putting in. But then if this was essentially a joint effort between myself and FOH, then we needed to start that process. So we had actually started collecting pledges during 2013, if I remember rightly. And the idea was whatever we had collected would become our working capital when we took over. So yes, I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but we were quite well prepared at the point that we took over. And for a year or more before that, I was involved in lots of discussions.
What were the biggest challenges that you faced in trying to save the club from extinction?
When I first came in, I guess, and to a certain extent, this hasn't changed. The biggest challenges that face, I'm going to say any business, I'll say any football club, is getting the football operation right, getting the finances right, and getting the people right. And these were the three pillars, if you like, that I looked to. Touched slightly on the finance side. So we had a bit of money because of the FOH having started to collect. I had put some money in as working capital. So financially, we knew how little we had, and it was very little. So there were a lot of financial issues, not least because, as I think, you know, when you come out of administration, certainly for a football club, you don't lose your football debts. So we still owed a lot of money to players, to some football clubs where we'd done deals and we hadn't yet paid them everything we owed them. So one of the early things was reaching out to all the people we owed money to and saying, can we come to an arrangement? And sometimes that was easy. Some of the players, again, I think I've said before, I remember Marius Lucas, when he was contacted, he came back and said, Hearts have been so good for me, I really don't need to be repaid. Not everybody did that, and not every football club did that, but so that was an additional financial challenge. On the football side, again, in anticipation of this all happening, I had already been speaking to Craig Levine, and saying, I don't know anything about football, you will have to tell me what we need to do. And he'd already lined up who he wanted as the manager, as you know, Robbie Nielsen. And he managed to bring us in a lot of good players that season. We'd lost a lot, partly because of the administration, but we'd lost players, and he managed to bring in a number of players who were core to the club for the first 2 or 3 years. We also were heavily reliant on the academy players and the young players. So we had different football challenges, we had different financial challenges. And on the people side, my first thought when I came in was, okay, we've got some really good people here. They're clearly totally committed to the club, but I need a management layer in here because, you know, we've got nobody who's guiding them or whatever. So it was bringing people in. And again, I had asked Eric, my partner, and if he would come in and work for nothing as a chief operating officer. I had asked Anne Park, who was my sales director in a previous life, and she jumped at the chance, even though she wasn't getting paid very much. So I kind of, and I've mentioned Robert Wilson. You know, I'd brought people in already, so we had the beginnings of a board. beginnings of a management team. And then in the first few months, it was a matter of looking at, right, what else do we need and what can we afford? So I brought in, within 2 or 3 months of taking over, I contacted Jackie Duncan, who I also knew previously, and asked her to come in as FD. So three, what we're going to do about finances, what we're going to do about football, and what we're going to do about people. And we had been working on them. So we just hit the ground. I'm not going to say hit the ground running. Well, I am. We hit the ground running. And fortunately, as we know, things went well that year.
Perhaps an achievement in itself to get the club back to that position and exiting administration in 2014, but there was certainly no letting up, no foot off the gas. What, on a personal level, what drove you to really keep driving the club forward?
I guess, excuse me, I've said before that the reason I got involved with Foundation of Hearts, or the reason I stayed involved, was about people. And I hadn't really appreciated, I thought my daughter was the exception, I hadn't really appreciated that football meant so much to so many people. And that's kind of got me hooked to FOH. And the same kind of thing happened, when we actually came in at 9 o'clock on the Monday morning and said, right, what are we going to do now? And again, I come back to people. There were people who'd given so much and were optimistic that we could actually make things work. But as well as that, I saw really for the first time just how bad other things were. I think I've recounted before that, for example, the groundskeeper, the groundsman, he couldn't even buy a bag of sand for the grass. Things were in such a bad way. I kind of felt, oh, well, I can fix this, or I can fix this. There was problems at every level. And some of them were there to be fixed. So I was kind of driven by, let's fix the easy ones and then we'll worry what comes next.
You mentioned hitting the ground running in that season in 2014, 2015, and since then you've packed in quite a lot. Championship wins, returns to the top flight. There's been Hampden trips, European football, the reintroduction of the women's team as well, who are going great guns. What have been your on-pitch highlights in your time at the club?
Again, you've mentioned one of them. I think it was almost disbelief that when we came in, given the position we were in, that we won the championship. I was going to say so easily. It wasn't easy, but so spectacularly. And so I still vividly remember going out onto the pitch and walking around with a cup and just seeing the joy, if you like, in all the stands. So I'll never forget that. In terms of games, there's another couple of things that come to mind. Our first game that season, I think I'm right, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, was Rangers at Ibrox. Yeah. And one of our new players that Craig had brought in, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Osman So struck the winner, and we actually left Ibrox winning the game, and that was a fantastic feeling. We had another one that year with Aleem at Easter Road, where again Aleem went to take that fantastic shot and we're all shouting, don't shoot, pass it. And of course it went in the net. So these kinds of things, I guess I remember the early moments more than I do the most recent ones, because it was kind of all new. Although I was a fan, I wasn't looking at football in the same way previously. So yes, I've got a lot of memories from that first year.
Away from the pitch, during your time at the club, there have been some major infrastructure projects, and we're sitting in the new main stand. There's the Tynecastle Park Hotel, the museum, just to name but a few. How proud are you to have achieved those things and leave a real legacy at the club?
I am actually. People have asked me this quite a lot recently, and it always does seem to come back to, the infrastructure changes. And I'm very proud of it because when I came in, as I've said already, I didn't know how to run a football club, but I thought I knew how to run a business. And so my focus was very much on the business side of things, and relying on other people keeping me right on the football side. So I kind of felt it was my job to do these things because I couldn't do very much on the football side. So no, I'm very, very proud. I genuinely love it when you leave, let's say you leave here on a Saturday or whatever, with all the lights on, the stand. I think we've kind of changed the face. We've certainly changed the face of Tynecastle. You could almost argue of Gorgie. It's a stunning building. But it's more than a building. It's obviously got all these things that you've mentioned. And they were all done. I think they've been described as my vanity projects by some of the less positive fans, as far as I'm concerned. They're not vanity projects. They built on my view, which is, if you're going to do something, you do it well. In my previous business, I used to always say the one thing we cannot compromise on is quality. And I wanted the same thing to apply at Hearts. We could have done a much more modest change to the old stand, but that wasn't the way to do it, in my opinion. And so everything we've done with a view to, we want it to be the best it can be. And that gives me pride because, as you say, we're sitting here in the skyline. I'm very proud of that. The hotel has done fantastically well. The Memorial Garden. I went to one of the services a few weeks ago, and it still brings tears to your eyes. So there's so much to be proud of. And you've mentioned a museum as well. When we started out, and you remember this because you were here longer, you've been here longer than me, that part of the stand, it was just a dumping ground. Broken chairs, broken pieces, broken everything. And when I decided that a museum would be a good idea, in my head, I suppose what I was thinking was a trophy room. I don't know much about museums. But again, we did it properly because we got someone, Caroline, who came in, and her background was museums. And so that grew arms and legs as well. So it wasn't just a trophy room. It told a story. Did it cost more than an alternative might have done? Of course it did. But, we're still proud of it. I'm very, very proud of what we've done here because I think we've done a good job.
You mentioned Gorgie. You've always placed a strong emphasis on community values and doing the right thing when you came into the club up until this very day. And the club now plays a pretty pivotal role in the community that must also elicit a great sense of pride.
It does indeed. And again, I'm reminded of the year I came in. One of the early meetings I had was from a then trustee of Big Hearts, telling me that they would have to close the doors because they'd suffered some fraudulent activity and they had no money and it wasn't working. And my thought at that time was, well, I'm waxing lyrical about doing all the right things and the community and so on. This cannot be one of the first things we do, is do away with the charity. So, as we all know, we didn't. We rebuilt the charity to something that we're all incredibly, incredibly proud of. But as well as that, we also set up our own community department. The charity does a certain type of work. Not necessarily all within Gorgie, but certainly in this part of Edinburgh. But we had other needs. We had the whole community football thing. So we did that, and we did it properly again. And so, you know, there's thousands of children, young people, who've gone through our community football offerings, and still do. I remember when the Gorgie Farm, there was an article in the Evening News saying the Gorgie Farm was going to have to close, it had gone bust, etc., etc. We've worked really hard with the farm to try and help it regenerate and not disappear. And we're still doing that. We're still trying to help. So yes, the football club and football stadium is such an integral part of Gorgie. It's absolutely vital that it's not just about keeping fans on side. You know, I'm sure a lot of people who live here hate every Saturday afternoon, you know, they can't get the cars parked or whatever it might be. But, you know, we've got to work hand in hand and help the local community. And I'm very proud and pleased that we do it so well.
Kind of along similar lines of doing the right thing, a lot was made of your decision back in 2014 to stop working with payday lenders and other industries that was deemed not in the best interests of the club and its supporters, which led to the benefactor model with Save the Children being introduced. You must allow yourself a sense of satisfaction when you look now and see the calibre of business people and brands that are associated with Hearts.
Yes, I do actually, because one of the things I should have said, when you said what were the challenges, there was another challenge, and that was rebuilding our reputation. You know, when a club like us go into administration, a lot of people suffer. Not the football people, as I've said, but other local suppliers or whatever, who basically lose money because, you know, we can't pay them. So our reputation was kind of down here. Not just for that, for other reasons as well, but the reputation was not good. And again, I'll go back to my previous company. I always reckoned one of the most important things was your reputation, quality, deliver what you say you're going to deliver. And so one of the first things I said to Anne Park when I brought Anne in was, right, we're going to struggle to get sponsors, we're going to struggle to get this and the other. But she was a fantastic account manager. And she and others worked really hard to bring people in. And I think I've said this before when we have our Player of the Year dinner for the last few years. Mercedes, that's quite nice, you know, to be associated with that brand. And of course others. So yes, going back to the Wonga, partly it was time. There were a number of things that needed to be done when I first came in. There were contracts coming to an end and so on and so forth. And it just didn't sit well with me that we're saying all these great things about how we're going to help the community and yet being associated with some of the businesses, perfectly good businesses. I remember asking what was Wonga like as a partner. Yeah, they were very good, I was told. But again, it wasn't the image that I wanted for Hearts. So it was quite a tough decision to say, right, we wouldn't be renewing that contract. To the extent that, again, one of the first times I met James Anderson, he'd said to me, what's your biggest challenge, Anne? And I said, well, my biggest immediate challenge is how do we get a front of shirt sponsor of the calibre that, you know, I feel we need. And again, everybody knows. James then said, well, he phoned me up a few days later and said, how would you feel about Save the Children? You know, now that was absolute heaven, you know, it was perfect. And obviously the forerunner of the same model, then going on to MND, for example. So no, it was a risky decision, and one that I thought long and hard about. Where do you take your money from? Where do you take your support from? But I'm delighted that we did do what we did, because obviously, look at the quality of our partners these days. Fantastic. And we rebuilt our reputation.
Fan ownership was one of the ultimate goals when you came in, and of course that's been delivered. Probably a lot of naysayers back in the day, doubting that such a model could be achieved, but proved them wrong.
Yeah, we did. There were indeed a lot of naysayers, as you put it. I'll tell you a story. I'm not sure if I've said this publicly before. I think it was the first year I was in place. I was asked to take part in a debate at Heriot-Watt University, and the debate topic was, could fan ownership ever work? Maybe you weren't there at the time. I'm not sure.
It does ring a bell.
Yeah. And I won't name names, but
I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm going to keep quiet.
Yeah. Fairly prominent figure now. He, chairman of another football club, and so he'd been invited to talk. I was invited to talk for it. He was invited to talk against it, and I always remember. Can I remember? His expression was, fan ownership could never work. What football clubs need is a benevolent dictator. And I was obviously arguing the opposite. Now, unfortunately, he won the debate, so that maybe should have made me think, oh, have I got this wrong? But it didn't. So despite all the negativity in the early days, yes, I think it's a fantastic model. And I think one of the things that makes it special is not everybody can afford to join FOH and buy a season ticket, for example. It doesn't matter, they're all supporting the club in whichever way they can. And people who can afford to do it have done it fantastically well. If circumstances change, we've said that from the beginning, if your circumstances change and you have to stop, don't worry about it, just stop. There's direct debit, that's all, just stop paying it. And it's just incredible to me, the level of contribution that we've had from the fans. So yes, I think we've proved it can work. We've still got a way to go, of course, because one of the things I've also said from earliest times was fan ownership, not fan management. So I think as long as we stick to the rules, if you like, that a business has got to be run by a board of directors and an executive management team who know what's happening, day in, day out, etc. Not by, half a dozen well-minded supporters. But that hasn't happened, and I don't think it will happen because of the model that we've set up. So that's not to say that they don't have power. Of course they do. They are the major shareholder. But it's important that the management team, in particular, and the board, are allowed to do the things that they feel are right for the club.
You've never let up during your time here, and a recent partnership could prove to be the most significant of all. Tony Bloom's investment into Hearts, that's something you were heavily involved with. Tell us about the work involved with bringing that to fruition.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. I was first approached in December 23. That was the first time I had a phone call saying, would I be prepared to speak? I think I've said this publicly before. I didn't even know who Tony Bloom was, so I did what we all do. I did a bit of Googling and online checking, and I thought, this isn't going to work, after everything I've said about gambling and all these sorts of things, this cannot work. However, it was a very genuine approach, and so I asked James Anderson if he would join me as an independent director to go down, I suppose because I thought, I'm going to come back and say, I don't think we should do this, and it would be quite nice to have somebody else of that view. Anyway, James and I went to the first meeting, and we both came out feeling what a fantastic opportunity it was. Because when the background is all explained and the gambling aspect is, it's not, encouraging, the man on the street to go in and place a bet. All of that was, I could absolutely understand. But as well as that, the whole discussion about, there was always going to be two deals. JTA software, which is the analytics that we're now heavily dependent on, and touch wood, so far seems to be going the right way. So a prerequisite is that we used JTA. So if we used JTA, then Tony was interested in investing. If we weren't prepared to use JTA, then his interest disappears. So yes, so we had our first meeting in London in January last year. I came back, I told the board, discussed everything with the board. There was a bit of negativity. Didn't like the idea of it, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we agreed that the first thing to do was to really have a look at JTA analytics, try and understand how it works, try and understand the implications. And that's not easy. That was not a short, sharp exercise. So we put a little team together to have a look at that and come back with a report on what do we think of it. Meanwhile, I was discussing with Tony's advisor, James Franks, who now sits on the board. We were keeping in touch and talking about other elements of it, but before we could really get heavily into the investment side, we had to make a decision on JTA. So we did make that decision, decided we would definitely go down that route, and in fact we signed a contract on the back of that, because the sooner we started using it, the sooner we would know if there was going to be a problem or not. So that took a bit of time, and then we started getting into all the details of someone who already is majority shareholder in one club wanting to buy into another one. The whole dual ownership thing was a challenge. We had to negotiate with the SFA and make sure that we were adhering to SFA rules, to UEFA's rules, quite apart from the commercials of this is a deal of somebody wanting to put money into the club. So there were a lot of meetings, a lot of tricky decisions to be made, problems to be overcome. And one of the things I would say is that Tony and James Franks, the longer we worked together, the more they were keen to make this work. So they were very, very good to deal with. So if we said, we're a fan-owned club, the perfect example, of course, is the fact that he accepted that he would have no voting rights with his shares. That could have been a total, showstopper. But again, in the same way as when I went down to London the first time, I went down there not expecting to come back with anything I was going to rave about. The first time James Franks and some of his colleagues came up here, it was to see ourselves and other clubs because they wanted to buy a Scottish club into a Scottish club. And I've subsequently been told we were bottom of the list, partly because of the fan ownership thing, I think, because that was going to make it difficult. But by the time they left on that day, we had jumped to the top of the list, and it was, no, they're the club we can work with. We've got similar values, etc., etc. So, yeah, there was a lot of work involved. But I don't think at any point did I feel, maybe in the early days, I thought this isn't going to work because of the complexities on the football side. But as time went by, I thought, no, we're going to overcome whatever the problems are and make this work. And of course it did.
I was going to say, I mean, it's still very much in its infancy, but do you allow yourself a wry smile given how things are going?
Yes. I think one of the things that was said repeatedly during the period of discussion was it's going to take a number of transfer windows, because essentially what we're saying is we're going to end up with a team of people who are probably all recommended by JTA. Now, that's not going to happen overnight. So it was, okay, let's try it and see. And so far, we're very pleased.
You kind of touched upon this already, but in the here and now, and it's perhaps slightly cliche, but do you see this moment as mission accomplished?
I guess I could say yes and no. Maybe from what I can bring or what I can do, I think I've probably done as much as I can do now, because we're moving into a different era. I fixed all the kind of, well, I hope, the infrastructure things, the commercial things, business things. They're all in very, very good shape. Fundamentally, as I've always said, although not everybody believes me, I don't forget we're a football club. And now, for us to go and make the strides that we want to make moving forward, being successful in Europe, all these sorts of things, it is about really making the football side work really, really well, and building, having a plan, if you like, for how do we get better? How do we become every football club in Scotland who goes into Europe struggles. Not insulting anybody, but they do. We know that. It would be great if we could actually learn enough so that when we went into Europe next time, we did better, and we keep doing better. So I just feel the focus is, everything was broken when I came in. Now a lot of things are in much better shape, but you need football brains now to help us do what we have to do moving forward. So having Tony and James Franks and so on board gives me a huge amount of comfort there. And I think, right, time for me to put my feet up.
Presumably you'll be keeping a keen eye on what's going on at the club as we head into this new era.
One of the things that would be very hard for me, when I first got involved, as you know very well, I kept my season ticket. I always had an expectation that after maybe 3 years I would go back to the Wheatfield stand and sit in a season ticket seat. I don't think I'll ever be able to do that now, to be honest. I mean, if for no other reason that it's row 23 and I don't think I can climb that high up. But
I'm sure someone will swap with you.
I'll have to have a word with Mark. Yeah, where was I going with that? If that's what was happening now, and I was leaving, and I think it would be awful for me. I wouldn't like it at all. The fact that that's not happening, and I'm very grateful for the fact that I've been made honorary president, still not used to the title yet. The fact that that's not happening, and that I believe I'm still going to be welcome in the club and certainly at games and whatever else, will make it much easier. And it would be very easy for me not to interfere now because it's not my ball anymore. I'm just coming to watch the games. So yeah, different, but I'm looking forward to it.
Just finally, Anne, so many people will have played their part during your time at the club. What is your parting message to fans, colleagues, family, friends, everyone really?
Yes, I guess, well, obviously it's thank you, but we all know that thank you is never enough. The fans have been fantastic. They've been magnificent, really. Even though I've had my share of budge outs and whatever else, you know, that's football. And fortunately, I'm the kind of person who's able to actually take that and move on. The fans have been amazing. My message to them is, if you can keep supporting the club through the bad times as well as the good times, because I hope I'm wrong, but you know, I've had a few ups and downs, and I'll be very surprised if we don't, at some point in the future, go through a difficult point. So I think the last few years, I think, have shown people that, okay, stick with it. And as long as they do that, I think we'll be fine. My family have been putting pressure on me for some time to give up, so okay, thank you for your patience. But I'm still going to be coming to the football on a Saturday. I think one of the hardest things for me will be no longer working with the people I've worked with the last 10, 11 years. They have been amazing. I said earlier that I brought a number of people in whom I'd known from a previous life, but there are also new people who've come in. And I used to say regularly that one of the things about Hearts was we had the best executive management team in Scottish football. And I genuinely believed that. I think we still have. And what's my message to them? Just a huge thank you. A promise that we won't lose touch. But as I've said to a couple of people, said it to Jackie when she left, it would be up to her to keep in touch with me because I'm very bad at that sort of thing. But yes, I'll always be here if anybody needs or wants advice or even an opinion. So yeah, let's just keep going, folks. You know, let's just move on to the next success. And hopefully in 10 years we'll be celebrating something else.
Well, Anne, it's been an honour and a pleasure. And on behalf of everyone, thank you.
Thank you.